All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Kelsey. I am a career coach in the College of Science and Technology. And we have with us a few employers who are going to share some tips and tricks on what you can be doing to prepare for virtual interviews. If you can do us a favor and drop in the chat just some things that maybe you were hoping to take away from today so that we can make sure that that's covered and you get all of your questions answered, then we will go ahead and turn it over. We have Julia, who's joining us from Vanguard, and Anna from Shift Profile, who will be sharing with us. So I'm going to turn it over to Julia to get us started.
Thanks, Kelsey. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining. As Kelsey had mentioned, my name is Julia Murphy. I'm on the University and Recruiting Partnerships team at Vanguard, so I'm responsible for the on-campus recruiting for our internship positions as well as our full-time opportunities. So sharing those with you, answering your questions about Vanguard, giving you some insight on the culture and different aspects of what it looks like to work at Vanguard. So I spend a lot of time on campus at Temple in normal situations, but I'm so grateful to be able to connect in a little bit of a different way, but still just as hopefully as valuable. And like Kelsey said, we're here to answer your questions, so don't be shy.
Thanks, Julia. Anna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you, Julia, and thanks, Kelsey. My name's Anna Papalia, and I am the CEO of Shift Profile. Previous to this role, however, I was the Director of Talent Acquisition for Connor Strong and Buckaloo, and in that role, I was responsible for hiring everyone from entry-level mail clerks all the way on up to executive vice presidents. I created the intern program that they're still using to this day. And by the time I left in 2011, I had hired over 80% of the workforce. I have a lot of experience as an interviewer and on the talent side. And leaving the organization, leaving the corporate world, I left to start an HR consulting firm to teach people how to interview. So for the last 9 years, I've specialized in that. I've actually worked with Temple University, as well as big companies like Lincoln Financial and Cigna. And it's really my job and my mission to teach people how to interview better. At last count, I've taught over 300 interview skills workshops, and I've also conducted over 5,000 mock interviews. So I have extensive experience on both sides of the table. So I'm excited to field some questions and offer any advice that I can to help in these unprecedented times.
Thank you. So I guess we'll kind of go back to Julia. If you want to talk a little bit about Vanguard and maybe any positions that you may be hiring for and kind of what your interview process looks like and any tips you have on interview prep.
Sure. So for those that may not be familiar or may not think of Vanguard as an employer that has opportunities for CS students or ISC or any related major, Vanguard definitely has those opportunities both on the internship and full-time sides. Vanguard itself, we're an investment management firm. We manage over $6 trillion in assets. So it's definitely a big player in the financial services industry. We're headquartered in Malvern, Pennsylvania, so it's not too far away from Temple's campus in the city, and I think because of that and a number of other reasons, we have a lot of success with hiring Temple students. What we look to for Temple and your student population, we really are able to hire kind of across the board. So whether it is on the IT side or on the business side, like I said, we've had a ton of success. So touching on those opportunities a little bit, we do have an internship program. It's called the IT College to Corporate Internship. It's a 10-week summer internship. So you would be spending your 10 weeks with us at our headquarters in Malvern, Pennsylvania. And within that internship, it's kind of broken down into a few different tracks: application development, technology operations, and security and risk. So for those 10 weeks, you would be specializing in one of those three areas. Same or very similarly, we have a full-time position, and it's structured so that we hope our internship program can be a feeder into this full-time program. The program itself is called the Technology Leadership Program. So again, this is going to be a full-time role. It's considered a leadership development program, right? So you'll be rotating through different areas within IT. Again, application development, technology operations, or security and risk. Those are going to be the 3 areas within the Technology Leadership Program. As a participant in this program, you rotate through 3 different areas within IT for a total of 2 years. So each of these rotations are 8 months long. You get a lot of exposure and experience in a short amount of time before what we consider launching into your full-time or permanent position once you've completed the 2 years in the Technology Leadership Program. So like I said, great way to get a lot of exposure to not only develop your technical abilities, but also your leadership skills. There's definitely a nice balance of both, which is really valuable for those candidates and students that we do hire into the program. And then outside of that, we hire a non-rotational full-time position known as an entry-level developer. So we use a lot of Java at Vanguard. We're a Java shop. So that's one of our main programming languages. And as a developer, you would potentially be working in Java as well as a number of other programming languages. But again, the entry-level developer role is one of our larger hiring needs for students that are graduating in May or have graduated the previous December. And it's a great way to get started in our IT department at Vanguard. And there's a lot of movement within not only IT, but kind of across Vanguard as a whole. So definitely keep that in mind when you look at opportunities at Vanguard. A lot of opportunity for growth, for mobility, and to experience a lot of different areas if that's something that you are looking for. And if not, a specialization and getting really deep in a specific area, definitely an opportunity too.
Sorry about that. Julia, real quickly, you also hire non-technical students as well. You've hired all different kinds and trained them for your customer service divisions and all kinds of areas, correct?
We have, yes. We really do hire for all majors at Vanguard. We have, like you said, in our retail division, we have client-facing opportunities. We have other leadership development programs focusing on investment management, corporate finance and accounting, one specifically focused within leadership. So, not as much focusing on that specialization, more so on an interest in financial services and also a passion for leadership and kind of pairing the two and bringing those skills into a financial services company. So definitely opportunity across the board. As you can imagine, our hiring volumes are not as high as they would be in a normal situation. Vanguard is not on a hiring freeze. We haven't taken that stance at all. We're still planning to start our interns and provide them with some sort of internship experience. Whatever that might look like is still up in the air, but we are definitely planning to give our incoming interns an opportunity. Same goes with our incoming leadership development program participants and other new hires into some of our entry-level positions. And then even looking forward for our 2021 hiring, so anybody that might be looking for an internship next summer or might be graduating next summer, or even in December of this year, we plan to move forward with our recruiting timeline, really business as usual. So those opportunities, again, internships and full-time positions, we'll begin hiring as early as this June for the upcoming 2020 opportunities. So I wanted to be sure to share that with you all so that you know, one, our recruiting timeline, and two, even just more broadly, that Vanguard is definitely hiring. The volumes might not be where they typically are at this point, but our plan and our stance is to continue with the regular hiring numbers and positions, all that good stuff, just like we would in normal circumstances.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I guess between Julia and Anna, if we have a couple questions coming in, so I want to make sure we get those addressed. So we have, what would be most important to keep in mind when interviewing in a virtual format? I will let either of you go.
To go. I would say first and foremost, I'd like to address that interviewing virtually is harder, and there's no doubt about that. So I didn't want to sugarcoat it, but there are ways that it could actually make it easier as well. Interviewing, as we all know, is a lot about confidence, and when you're in your own place, your own home, it might make you feel a little less nervous than being across an intimidating boardroom table in front of an intimidating executive. So there's a little bit of a barrier that will decrease the nerves, but then you may feel nervous because you're in your bedroom or you feel a little bit more casual. So it may balance out a bit. I also think some really key aspects of a virtual interview is that you have to also try a little harder. In an in-person interview, you can pick up on some nonverbal communication and social cues without really trying. You can read the energy of a room. That is much more difficult on a Zoom call. I did a training this morning with 10 participants. I usually do it in person. And there's something that happens when you're virtual. You just don't have the same feeling. So you have to do more check-ins, asking, did that answer your question, or making sure that you're listening maybe even harder, because it's easier to get lost when you can't rely on nonverbal communication. Because in normal in-person interviews, our nonverbal body language actually speaks 80% more than the words that we speak. So we don't really know it, but we're creating an impression on someone with how they sit in the chair and how they hold the padfolio and their body language and their eye contact. And you still need that virtually. You still need to dress up for your interviews. I always tell people to sit on the edge of their seat to show enthusiasm. Same things apply. It's just a little harder to pick up on it on the other end, and for you as well to show your level of enthusiasm or interest. It's just a little harder.
Great, thank you for sharing that. So you mentioned, being at home, being in our own spaces, we may be in our bedrooms. And someone actually asked, how weird would it be if the only space you have is your bedroom and your bed's in the background?
I mean, these are really unprecedented times, and I would hope that almost every interviewer will understand. I'm sure Julia would agree. We're not expecting you guys to be speaking to us from a corporate boardroom. We're expecting you to be speaking to us from your bedroom or from your living room or kitchen table. The bigger concern is that we can hear you, we can see you, there aren't a million people talking in the background that makes it distracting. And really importantly, that nothing inappropriate is in the background, like a really inappropriate poster. And inappropriate can mean even something religious. Obviously, you're not supposed to talk about religion or politics in interviews. So you want to try to remove any of that from the background. If you have a big poster of something that could be overly religious or political, I would take that down. But a bed, hey, we got to do our Zoom calls where it's quiet. So if your bedroom's where you can do it, or an attic, make it work. And that's okay. I'm sure Julia, I'm sure she has something to add as well.
Yeah, I mean, all things considered, my background is my bedroom. So this is where I've been taking meetings for the last month. It's to your point, Anna, it's quiet in my bedroom. I have family members that are downstairs. I have a dog, so the distractions are much more minimal in this space. And again, just to your point, eliminating as many distractions as you can. Again, if the doorbell rings and the dog starts barking, that's out of your control, but that's okay. I completely agree. I think hiring managers now more than ever are going to be more understanding. And as long as you're making the effort to do everything you can to eliminate those very obvious distractions and something potentially inappropriate or off-putting that is in your background, I think that'll be the least of your worries. It's really about establishing that connection and attempting and doing your best to build rapport over a video or a phone interaction. It is harder to do so without actually getting that in-person engagement, but it's what the new normal looks like. So I think everybody is adjusting. And if it brings you any comfort or solace, it's new for everyone. So it's not just you in a unique situation. This is what's going on with all of us across not only the country, but in the world. So it's a learning experience for everybody. So both sides of the camera are trying to adapt, and I find comfort in that too, just depending on who I might be on a meeting with, and seeing some of our senior leaders at Vanguard taking meetings from their bedrooms, again, just gives you a little bit of comfort.
Julia, I was wondering, could you talk specifically about the virtual interview process that you've been doing now with, a variety of candidates, IT, non-IT? What should a student expect? How does the process work from the time they get an email that says, we want to do a virtual interview?
Sure.
So tell them a little bit about that process from the beginning to the end.
Sure. So the beginning half of our process looks identical. Once this candidate has applied on Vanguard's careers website, the next step from there is a recruiter reaching out to set up a phone interview. So we still have the phone interviews in place, and that's the way it always goes. That first interview over the phone with a recruiter includes some behavioral-based questions, so asking about your prior experiences, things you have listed on your resume, and trying to get to know you a little bit more on that in that aspect. And then depending on the position, there will be some technical questions also included on that phone interview. So just trying to gauge your technical acumen and skills based on, again, some of the things you might have listed on your resume or learned in the classroom or in capstone, whatever that might look like. So that part of the interview looks the same. The part that has changed is in normal circumstances, we then, following a phone interview, will invite a candidate to our campus, depending on the location that they might be interviewing in. That's where we'll bring them in to interview in person. That no longer is our process. We are hosting virtual interview days, very similar to kind of what we're doing now. That we're broken. We invite multiple candidates to this virtual interview day so that we can kick it off with an overview of Vanguard, talking about some of our benefits and other aspects that we would discuss, again, in person normally. The recruiters will lead that. Other times hiring managers will lead that. So you'll be in a group setting, again, not in person, but it'll not just be you and a hiring manager for the entirety of this virtual interview day. But once we kind of get past that piece of the interview day, that's when you'll meet one-on-one with a hiring manager. So again, this will be a video interview, one-on-one with a hiring manager, asking additional behavioral-based questions as well as additional technical questions. So there's a chance that you may get a similar question that you had gotten on the phone interview, but most of the time it's definitely different sets of questions from the hiring manager. And it's all done over video. You work with the recruiters as well as the scheduling folks to get everything set up so you can test the technology, you have the links that you need, and the recruiters are there to support throughout the entirety of the interview day. So if something did happen to go wrong or cut out, you have a contact in order to get back on track. But again, those technical glitches that are sometimes inevitable, we have been fortunate that our interview days have gone pretty seamlessly up until this point. But it's new, like I said, back to my point of it being new for both parties. We had to really quickly put this into place because we weren't ready to or in a position to freeze our hiring or to rescind offers or anything along those lines. So we transitioned to this virtual model fairly quickly, and like I said, it's been pretty seamless thus far. I don't want to jinx it, but
great, thank you. So we have a couple questions about what qualities or what would pique your interest as an employer in hiring potential candidates or in technology as a whole. Julia, this might be more based towards you.
No, that's fine. I can jump in. I mean, I'll speak broadly because I want to make sure that the tech and the non-tech students can relate to, you know, the messaging. I think the combination of course, your GPA and making sure that that's a priority and looks good on the resume. That's a pretty basic piece of information, but beyond that, your resume, I mean, I know Rose and Kelsey are the experts here, and getting your resume reviewed is so important, because you want to make sure you're capturing all of your experience, whether it's industry experience or just a job, you know, at the local grocery store or whatever that might look like. You want to make sure that you're capturing that and highlighting the skills that are transferable from that position that you hold or have held, and why those skills are going to make you a strong candidate for whatever role you're interviewing for. I think it's also important to, as you go through the application process, to understand the position that you're applying for and the organization that you're applying for, just so that you know that the qualifications that are listed on the website or on the job posting align with the experiences and skills that you do have, so that right off the bat you're able to check some of those boxes, and then have the recruiter even explore your qualifications further. So I mean, I think a lot of, to answer the question, what would grab your attention or pique your interest for a candidate, a lot of that is very dependent on the role that the recruiter is hiring for or recruiting for. So being self-aware and giving the time to read through job descriptions and qualifications and things along those lines will definitely help both parties, because if it's a position that requires 5 to 10 years of experience and you're you know, a junior in college, you're not going to meet that very basic qualification, although it might be something that you see yourself doing down the line. You have to have that awareness and realistic expectations. So just being aware there. But I think, again, to answer this more generally, I think the combination of your work experience and your campus involvement, that's really going to make you stand out to an employer. There's no right or wrong way to do that. There's so many different clubs and organizations and events and things that Temple has on campus that you can get involved in. And then again, if it's an industry related work experience, great. And if it's not, just being able to really convey what skills you've acquired from that experience and how that will be transferable into whatever role that you're applying for.
Lots of math. Yes, I think exactly that, the transferable skills. That's something that when we talk with any students, that many of you, especially if you're a freshman or sophomore, you maybe haven't gotten into your major as deep as other students. And so using the experiences that you have and pulling from that, especially soft skills, right? Communication, problem solving, critical thinking skills, anything like that, that you can really highlight when you're talking with employers, whether it's, you know, on your resume or if it is in the actual interview, and coming to an interview with examples of those skills, right? Not just having the skills, but being able to share, you know, whether it was in a part-time job or an internship or maybe a class project. So taking advantage of all of those experiences that you may have had.
And I question for you, when we were talking about things that, you know, piqued your interest when you're interviewing someone? And I know you've done hundreds and hundreds of interview preps for all different types of jobs. What do you tell students to prepare so that they can be a memorable candidate for whatever the opportunity is they're seeking?
I prepare my students and my clients by telling them that I want to be the best version of themselves. And I don't want them to feel inadequate because they waited tables or they worked at Rita's Water Ice or they were a lifeguard. I have seen unbelievable candidates and incredible naturals at interviewing who don't have any quote unquote real work experience. What they do have and what they corner the market on is self-awareness. And most people always ask me, what's the thing people don't do or how do they fail at interviews? And the number one thing people don't do enough is that they don't prepare enough. And the best way to prepare is to develop your self-awareness and to really learn who you are. What are your strengths and weaknesses? And if someone should ask you, why should I hire you? You know how to answer that question. You're not just regurgitating strengths. You're instead telling them what makes you different than everybody else. And this isn't just something that I think or feel or it's good, it sounds good, in a presentation. I really live and breathe this. For example, I moved out at 15 to escape an abusive stepfather, and I got into the University of Pennsylvania in my college interview because I told the story of what I had to do to survive and how I worked a full-time job and ended up graduating high school and how important it was to me to get educated and to get myself out of that situation. And I waited tables for 5 years to put myself through school. And I think I could sell waiting tables probably better than I could any corporate job I've had. And when I see a student that has waited tables or done anything, janitorial work, it doesn't matter. I tell them, well, what did you learn? Just like Julia said, what are the transferable skills? And for me, waiting tables was learning how to multitask, learning how to think on my feet, and learning how to talk to the public speaking. And I think I learned more in that 5 years waiting tables than I have in any of my corporate jobs. And it doesn't matter what your experience is. What matters is the confidence that you bring to the table, that you can sell yourself, not because you're proud of it, because at the time you might not be proud of it. You sell yourself because you know what it has given you. And what it has given you is this strength to, maybe you know that you have a high attention to detail. Maybe you know that you are driven. Whatever it might be, own that. Speak from there. That's where confidence comes from. And that's why people hire you.
That's great. Kelsey and I all the time talk to students who say, oh, I've only ever been a waitress. And my response is, anybody who's been a waitress has developed the best soft skills around, because you have to have them all if you're going to do that. So you're speaking right up of Kelsey and I's alley on that one. Julia and Anna, how long are we seeing the hiring process take these days? I mean, what should students expect? Is it longer? Is it shorter? What are you seeing?
I don't think that there's anything at all to compare this to. To Julia's point, this is a new thing that we're all dealing with. A lot of my clients are luckily proceeding like business as usual, and that's fantastic. And they want to hire in the same fashion and fill the same roles, but I don't have an answer. All I know is we're trying our best. We're hoping it's going to take the same amount of time, but we don't have anything to compare it to. So we don't really know. Is it going to be faster or longer?
Yes, I completely agree. There really isn't anything to compare this to. And I think this is an opportunity, right? A lot of companies are just not going to be in a position where they can be hiring. Others, even, candidly, some of Vanguard's competitors are really taking advantage of this job market, just given where they are and their ability to continue hiring. So it looks different based on the industry, based on opportunities. But I think it's definitely giving an opportunity for companies and employers to do right by their candidates. And what I mean by that is keeping the lines of communication open, providing updates as much as they can and as candidly as they can. I know at Vanguard, our recruiters are really doing everything that they can in order to keep specifically our intern candidates and recent graduate hires into some of these entry-level roles as informed as we can. So that communication piece in times where and talk about, uncharted waters, none of us know the right way to navigate this situation, but there's definitely different practices and approaches, and I think the communication piece is definitely something that candidates are valuing. So we're doing our best on that front to communicate as much as we can, as frequently as we can, just with changes or updates and or anything along those lines. So the process might be longer, it might be normal, but back to Anna's point, we don't have anything to compare it to. So it's a tough question.
One of the things we talked about this morning with the group we met with was, in some ways, this is a good time for students because recruiters aren't as busy. And in some companies, it's time for recruiters to actually start making connections with people so that when the hiring bubble freezes or the freeze is over, that they have candidates in what they call the pipeline. We have encouraged students to reach out to recruiters using LinkedIn and finding those companies that you really want to work for and engaging and connecting and really starting to build relationships with those recruiters. And oftentimes, Julia and Anna, students think that LinkedIn is stalking people. But if you guys could address, LinkedIn and how you use it and what students should be doing on LinkedIn, I think that would be a big help to them.
Yeah, sure. I want to speak to that. I have a lot of clients that are students, and they say just that. They feel like they're stalking someone if they go online. And I sort of laugh at it and I say, no, if you're not doing your research before the interview, that's the biggest mistake of all, right? You're supposed to prepare, practice, get to know yourself. But if you're not also getting to know the other person on the other side of the table, not just the organization, yeah, you need to look at the website and check out some of the mission statement and the facts and all that good stuff and the job description, absolutely. But if you're not checking out someone on LinkedIn or doing a cursory Google search to see what that person cares about, you're missing a real opportunity. And that opportunity is, how do you make a connection with that person in an interview? Let's say you Google someone and you find out that they went to the University of Vermont. Both of your parents went to the University of Vermont, and you have that connection and you can bring it up in an interview. You'd be amazed how many times this tip has gotten someone to the next level. You need to, especially in a virtual environment, do whatever you can, collect as much information as you can on the research side so you can leverage those tips so you can get further in the process. And I think it's also expected. Thousands of people look at my LinkedIn profile, especially when I was hiring and now as a coach. And I would think it was weird if they didn't look at my LinkedIn profile before I were to interview them. I would think that they were unprepared. That's how I feel.
I agree. The research piece is so important, and it goes beyond the company for sure. I also think that, again, this is a totally new environment for all of us. And I know that a lot of students are in the situation where maybe their internship was canceled, or a full-time offer might have been rescinded based on what's going on with the company and how it's been impacted by COVID. So I think any of those relationships that you have previously established with recruiters, maybe from a career fair or a networking event, or from a recruiter that you've found on LinkedIn just based on the company that they work for, or you know that you're interested in, reaching out and asking uh, both a career related question as well as just checking to see how they're holding up given our current environment. That goes a really long way. I know on my end, unfortunately we have filled our internship um, positions for this upcoming summer of 2020. And I've had a few students reaching out that I've met on campus throughout the fall and even in this past spring semester before they all went remote. And like I said, they might be in the situation where their internship it has been canceled and they're reaching out to ask what Vanguard's stance is or what we're doing in response to all of this. And although we can't offer them an internship position for this upcoming summer, it's definitely something to note that, hey, they thought of Vanguard. We know they're really interested, and we can share our upcoming recruiting timeline for full-time positions in 2021 when they graduate. So just being thoughtful and very intentional about those relationships that you have established. The network that you build for yourself is so important because maybe the person that you directly reached out to might not have an opportunity, but someone in their network, they know that their internship recruiting is still active and they have a spot or anything along those lines. So taking advantage of your network and those relationships that you have established or that you are looking to establish, I think now's a no better time, honestly.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to point out to students is, so say you're going for an interview at, what was the name of the firm, Anna? You said you recruited for IBX, right? Blue Cross? Who do you work with? One of the companies you work with?
Cigna?
Cigna. Okay, so say you're going to an interview at Cigna. So one of the great things to do is as you go through LinkedIn, go look at the other students who have graduated from Temple or other people who've graduated from Temple who also went to Temple and now work at Cigna, and reach out to them as well. The vast majority of people have been in your shoes before and they want to help you. If they can, have a brief chat with you about what the interview process like, what the culture's like, some things to check and follow up with. And then what often will happen is they'll say, oh, who are you talking with? And they'll say, oh, I'm talking to Sally. Oftentimes they'll reach out to Sally via an email and say, oh, I just talked to so-and-so from Temple and they're coming in to meet with you. And that immediately builds a relationship and a depth in the interview that is invaluable. Or you reach out and say, oh, I practice interviewing with Anna and she suggested in my Cigna interview, I do this, this, and this. Those recruiters remember that. So also keep in mind that your Temple network, your personal network, it's really critical in this process.
I'd like to add a point to that the number one way people get a job is through their personal networks, whether that be exactly the informational interview that you're talking about. Building these relationships in this downtime is wonderful, but the way people get jobs is through who their brothers, friends, uncles, cousin. Like, send an email to every single person you've ever met and every single person your parents have ever met, and attach that really polished, really well-written resume with a little cover letter there telling them what you're looking for very specifically. And I guarantee someone that you know in 6 degrees of separation will make you a referral. And Julia can attest that referrals are one of the strongest sources when it comes to recruiters. Put yourself in a recruiter's shoes. You have an applicant tracking system with 10,000 names in it. You have your email in front of you, and then you have your employees. Well, we used to when we actually worked in offices, or they're in front of you because they're on chat or over email. And you're trying to fill a position. You can either mine a database of random resumes that came in through the website, or you're going to talk to somebody, or an employee is going to walk over or send you an email and say, I've got the perfect candidate for you. The fact of the matter is most recruiters and most internal talent departments are going to focus on and prioritize internal referrals first. So that should be your first source. If you don't have the source, if you don't have the network, I didn't either. I moved to Philadelphia to come to Penn. I didn't have a huge network of people. You have to make it yourself, and you have to do what Julia is saying. You have to make that network. You have to put yourself out there. And it doesn't mean you can't get the job. It means it's just a little harder. And the way you do that is you reach out to recruiters either on LinkedIn or make a cold call or call someone in the organization, get your foot in the door. That's like the old-fashioned pounding the pavement. That's how you do it nowadays virtually.
Julia, anything to add to that? I know referrals are a big deal for you guys.
Referrals are a big deal. Definitely agree with you, Anna. And referrals, and then also any interaction. Again, my typical talk track around this is attending events on campus and getting to have that one-on-one time and conversation with the employer themselves, whether it's the recruiter, whether it's an alum, whether it's somebody just works in a related field to maybe the topic of the networking event or the presentation or whatever it might look like. That almost validation or any notes, if you will, or details that that the employer will then bring back and share with a recruiter, and a resume with some notes attached from a conversation that a colleague has had with the candidate versus, again, to Anna's point, a random resume in our applicant tracking system. That resume with the details or additional context is definitely going to be prioritized because, one, we have somebody speaking on behalf of this candidate, and two, that candidate took the time to attend an event or, again, jump on a Zoom meeting to get some best practices around interviewing tips or whatever it might be. All of that does carry weight, so don't take those opportunities for granted. I think those really just, again, make you stand out, whether it's listed on your resume or not. Just taking that extra step and making one new connection, I think can definitely go a long way.
I'd like to add to that a lot of students think that the application process is filling out an application on a website and hitting send and then crossing their fingers. That is only a fraction of the process, to Julia's point. And I think that's such a great way to put it. Don't take for granted those events. You have to do extra work to get the interview. You cannot just submit your resume and hope that you get a phone call. You have to understand that companies often get 10,000 resumes a month or a year, depending on how large the organization is. So you are just going to be a resume in a database unless you make yourself known by going to an event, reaching out, doing your research, and making yourself stand out somehow and getting connected if you can.
One additional thing, I'll plug Kelsey and Rose. They should be two of your, they should be your best friends. They should know, Rose and Kelsey should know who you are. That you should have them review your resume because they have the relationships with employers. And that is something that maybe you don't know exactly how to go about that situation, but Kelsey and Rose do. So ask them questions and ask them to point you in the right direction because they have those relationships already. So it allows you to not have to start completely from scratch. They can introduce you, they can forward your resume along. There's a million different ways that can go. But you should absolutely take advantage of those resources that are right in front of you.
Thank you, Julia.
Sure.
So we have one question. How do you respond to the tell us your weaknesses question? And maybe Anna can start with this. And
Sure, happy to. This is one of my most favorite questions I often get. I think there are two questions that stump most job seekers. The first one is the open-ended question that a lot of recruiters start with, which is, tell me about yourself. Students get really overwhelmed. And the other one is, what's your weakness? Sometimes if the recruiter's nice, they may say, tell me a strength and a weakness. They'll warm you up a little bit. But the way to answer this question, obviously, you don't want to you don't ever want to talk about, you don't want to ever throw yourself under the bus in an interview. You don't want to talk poorly about yourself. But you also want to answer the question. So if you Google this question right now, one of the top results will be, I'm a perfectionist. That's the best answer. All these Google results will say, what's your weakness? Well, I'm a perfectionist. I highly doubt there are all these perfectionists out there. I would chuckle every time someone would give me that answer. And then I would look at their GPA and I'd go, oh, really? 2.9 perfectionist. So the real way to answer this question is to obviously first think about it, and think about a way that you can phrase this diplomatically that can show that it is something that can be construed as a strength, right? So for example, I'll give you one of my weaknesses, and I have many, as we all do. I am very, very impatient, incredibly impatient. Now, I would also list how that benefits me. I'm really driven and I get things done, but it's a weakness because it's hard to work for me or with me. And I need to learn that the good things in life take time, right? The dough needs time to rise. The seed needs time to germinate. So if you can think about what that answer might be for you personally, what is true and what is truly a weakness, but that it has to sound and can be construed into a strength. I've asked students this over the years, and I'll never forget this one student in a mock interview. I said, so what's your weakness? And he leaned back all the way in his chair and he went, I'm lazy. I was like, well, I don't know what we do with that. So that's a perfect example of a weakness not to give. You need a weakness that can be construed as a strength. I would never say that you're late, or that you're a procrastinator, or that you don't like public speaking. Those aren't good weaknesses. Think deeply, dig deeply. You all know what it is you need to work on. And if you have a hard time coming up with this, think back to advice that your professors have given you, that maybe Kelsey and Rose have given you, that your parents have given you. Heck, even what your boyfriend or girlfriend has told you. There's always usually a grain of truth in there and something that you can work on.
Definitely, I completely agree with all of your points, Anna. I think a part of that weaknesses question too is not necessarily learning what your true weakness is, again, because we don't want to hear that you're a procrastinator or that you're always running late. While those things might be true, you don't need to phrase it like that. What an employer is looking for is self-awareness and being able to recognize something that, again, might not be your strongest attribute, but you can identify it and you can share in that same sentence or response how you are working to improve. I think that that's a really important piece of the weaknesses question too, is not, I am always procrastinating and I miss almost every deadline. It's like, okay, well, are you doing anything to make that better, or it's just something that you've accepted and you're fine with that? And as a candidate, that's not how you want to be portraying yourself to an employer. So definitely thinking about a very intentional way of responding to that question. And it's not going to come to you when you're being asked on the spot. It's definitely something that you need to think about, but then also before an interview, practice and get your talk track down, because that's really going to be important too. It is a hard question though, and it's definitely something, back to kind of what I was saying, you have to think about.
Absolutely. And so a lot of, I think, the feedback today, or the tips, have been around the employers getting to know students. But how would you recommend, I guess, beyond that research piece by students or candidates, how would you say going about getting to know the culture in this virtual environment at a company? What might be some tips that students can use for that?
Well, right off the bat, I'm going to say don't rely on Glassdoor. That's another really easy way. It's like hitting apply and crossing your fingers. Doing a little research on Glassdoor and making an assumption of what someone said, I would take all of that with a grain of salt. Think about before you try a restaurant or order delivery, are you going to read every Yelp review? And imagine who's writing the reviews, right? Are they like you? So you really can't think that much about these Glassdoor reviews. I would do your own research. I would Google the company. I would ask people that you know. I would have informational interviews like we were talking about. And most importantly, the resources that you have now in college, you will never have again. These, any appointments that you can make with Rose or Kelsey, but in addition to that, anything that any employers do at school, any speaking events, any webinars, take advantage of that. That's the way you're going to get to know an organization. How do they present themselves? What's the reputation? And then candidly, in the interview process, how do they treat you? How do they communicate with you? That says a lot. And I always tell my students, I know you feel as though you'll just be lucky to get a job, but interviewing is a two-way street, and you will have a certain feeling about some companies. And I've heard hundreds of stories of companies, not Vanguard, that have ghosted candidates, right? Or have left people in the lurch. And it happens just as much as students do it to companies, right? I think everyone's guilty of it. But in a way, you have to trust your instincts after you've done all this research and think very clearly, very carefully about that interview you had with that person who's going to be your hiring manager. Did you click with them? Do you think that you can learn from this person? If it's an internship, the number one thing you need to be considering is, am I going to learn there? Am I going to advance there? Do they have opportunities for me? I have students and clients who get several internship or position opportunities, and they genuinely want to take the one that pays better first, but they kind of know in their gut that there's a better one, even though it pays a couple dollars less an hour. Take that one. Take the one where you know you'll be fulfilled and you'll do the best job, because that's what's going to make you succeed farther and faster, is being in a role that you feel successful in, and the money will come. Internships, what you make as an intern, have no bearing on what you'll make in 20 years. So I would be very careful to do your own research, have informational interviews, go to the college, any college activities that you can, any company-sponsored events. Right now, everyone's doing a webinar, so check those out and do that research. And then ultimately, it doesn't matter what anyone says. Trust yourself, trust your gut. If it's a good fit, it'll be a good fit.
And one thing I'll just add, and we had touched on it briefly earlier, but utilizing those LinkedIn connections with, I think alumni are right off the bat, you have something in common with that person. So the relationship is somewhat established. And if you are interested in a specific company and you have done your research and all of that, it's really valuable. But if you're trying to get some firsthand information and learn a little bit more about the company's culture, those types of connections are exactly how you're going to get that information. That person will be honest with you, and they'll share maybe their career path, certain things that they like or dislike about the organization that they work for, maybe something that they wish they would have known when they were accepting an internship or their first job out of college. All of that you can get from someone, again, I'm using the alumni example, but somebody that you can kind of search on LinkedIn and it's a really simple, easy way to make connections and get that information. You also need to identify those things that are important to you and that what you're looking for in an organization. So before you even conduct the research, know what you're looking for. I think that that's so important too, because there's certain things, and it's different for every single one of us. The values, the pieces of the culture that are really going to be important and resonate with you. If as you're looking through a company's careers website or their Instagram or their LinkedIn and you're not seeing these certain aspects that you're looking for, that's probably not going to be a good fit for you. That's okay, because back to what Anna was saying, that might indicate that you're not going to be successful in that organization, or you might not feel that you're making an impact or adding value, not based on your job qualifications or how you can do the job, because you know, that might be a home run, but those other things that are going to really build up that full package for an employer or an organization that are going to make you the best version and the best employee that you can be. There's a lot of different aspects that or pieces to that puzzle. So to know what you're looking for when you are doing the research too, I think that'll be really helpful.
Thank you so much. Gosh, we're gonna, I guess, wrap it up now because I see we're at 6 o'clock. So thank you both, Julia and Anna, for your insight and sharing everything. I know this was really valuable for students and even for me and Rose and other staff and faculty who've been on the meeting as well. This was really great. So thank you so much. For our participants, we are recording this, so we will make this available to you as soon as we have it up on our website. If you all have any questions, feel free, you can pop it in the chat or email us. All right.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.
And good luck, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks.